The asylums of our hidden past. As a topic I'd like to touch on this week, in particular the asylums of North America and America, and the Columbus Asylum for the Insane in Ohio. And right off the bat, when you look at these asylums in North America, and this one is the rebuilt after the fire of the original Columbus, Ohio asylum, but they look like European palaces, not places where you would keep the insane. Palaces, castles. This was Blackwell's Island. This was the original asylum in Ohio. Started construction in 1835, or they started getting approval and fundings in 1835, but it only took a year to build this, they say. And that's a little bit of the narrative I'd like to break down today. The impossible build times again of these old world structures. You've seen my Towering Towers of Tartaria video. You'd see another one of these amazing build times in Chicago. They tell us these structures built in a year's time with a population of less than 1 million in Ohio. You got Charity Hospital, a little modest castle comparatively to a lot of these. And of course, when we try and look for more information on this Columbus State Hospital, you get very little information of this impressive structure by the mainstream. It was known as the Ohio State Hospital for Insane. Founded in 1838, rebuilt after a fire in 1877. It's a rebuilt structure again, just looking like a European castle at the Antiquitech towers and all. And who would think to house psychiatric patients in castles like this? And today we just fill them up with addictive petroleum-based pharmaceuticals and send them on their way. Looks like grounds is now a prison. Fitting. But you see this all over America in particular. And I just kind of go through a little slide of some of these mud flood pictures I found recently. I do just love collecting all these images and buried it past and sharing them with you guys, my commentary on them. Just how we just kind of buried out this stairwell here. So many great researchers, independent of course. Mainstream will never touch this subject. They just laugh it off as nothing more than basement windows and doors. They don't dare like to question the fact that we were not the most advanced civilization. Far from it. Indeed, merely just the inheritors. Let me get back on subject of the asylums here in just a moment, but I thought I would share some of these with you guys. So many cities, and European cities, even America, it just looks like they're just unburying them. You see all over this realm, the buried structures. And clearly this is not a basement window, nor is this. You can see the whole earth just shoved right up against this castle. And these gentlemen discovered railroad tracks several feet below the surface. Nothing to see here, folks. Buried railroad tracks. And again, much can be seen here in America. The laying of the railroad, the transcontinental railroad, they say. These are the construction pictures, looking very much like the unburying. The evidence of this mud flood can be found all over this realm. Completely buried windows here. Looks like an archway even there. And again, remember they found something very similar to this in a near hometown of mine in Illinois. Can't quite remember the city there. I believe it was Alton. Have all these entranceways to these buildings right here. Clearing out a courtyard and finding structures originally going much deeper than they thought. You find so many of these churches in Russia too, just abandoned in the middle of nowhere. The population so much smaller than what they claim we have now, and yet you find so many of these red brick castles and churches-like structures in the middle of nowhere, abandoned and or buried. But it's definitely not just these fancy buildings that we see above ground now. Everywhere you look, this is a whole doorway, it almost looks like. I believe there's been many resets, some by mud and the floods and waters. Others you can see buildings that just look like they were charred and melted and scorched. But it is not just the Ohio Asylum. Asylum in New York. Asylums in South Carolina. All of these massive and impressive structures for such a new country. Under 100, 200 years old, and we had such a population that warranted this, and to be built in such grand fashion. Look like castles and palaces, not medical facilities. And then of course the things that they did there under the dome, fitting. These look like capitals. I mean, you could just cut out this part and put insert random state capital and we would buy it. I mean, looks just like a state house, not a asylum. Again, they have the dome towers. I'm sure there was some kind of antenna here. I mean, do these look like the places for the insane, and based comparatively on what we do now, just throwing them out in the streets? And I mean, just look at these beautiful buildings. And it would be one thing maybe if we buy the narrative that they would make these grand structures to house the insane in, if they treated them with any form of respect or decency. But much like the orphan trains, and again the massive orphanages, this was the redistribution, repopulation of a realm after a reset. You can just see the mud-flooded buildings here. Another asylum. And yet another grand-looking palace. This one is in England, but just does not make sense. The narrative that we are left in the story that they tell us about it. And if you look on deep here to get really any details about the construction or anything. Constructed in 1838, started building in 1838, and opened its doors in 1838. 1 year. Unbelievable. Truly. Much like this doctor's claim of 100% cure rate. Well, lobotomy was a good choice, of course, back then. Build these glorious palaces to keep these people in, and then you do uncivilized things to them. I believe these buildings were there, much like Chicago and all these other cities in America. We were just the inheritors that came into the lands after the reset. Took these glorious Tartarian palaces and castles, called them asylums, called them prisons. And it's up to us to learn this true history of our realm. And I think I'll leave it at that for the night. I appreciate all your guys' support on my channels, both here and on my TikTok, Instagram. Wish I can have more time to post here on YouTube. Once the summer times wind down, my son just had his 4th birthday, so planning of that and celebrating of that. It's been quite busy in my household the last couple weeks, but I hope to get back to posting more weekly videos on my channel. And if you haven't followed my other channels here, you can check out my link tree in my bio below here. In my description of my video, I'll post a link. This has all my other channels here, my TikTok. You guys haven't seen that. Try and post a little video every day on this at least, but great ways to get a hold of me. Any suggestions, requests, messages, feel free to reach out to me. I try and respond to all of them. But I do appreciate, again, all your guys' support on my channels. And until next time, question everything, friends.